Shalom and welcome. I'm Lee with Fiery Faith Ministries, and I'm here with Andrea Sims. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, yes, I'm so excited. We're on the third chapter of The Truth About Wise, the journey of a recovering imposter. And I know, as everyone else is, we're just on the edge of our seat to get to chapter 3, or my third chapter.
All right.
So I am going to pull myself out and I'll pull up your wonderful book here. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Life lies in full bloom, my third chapter. It seems only right that I should begin my third chapter with a further explanation of the source for it. The author defines the third chapter as those years when we're neither old nor young, and how it can become the most transformative time in our lives, just as long as we have the courage to challenge the ageist stereotypes, the creativity to resist the old cultural norms, the curiosity to be open to new learning, and the adventurousness to pursue new passions and experiences. As I shared in my introduction, when my eyes landed on Lightfoot's book, the third chapter, that day in Barnes & Noble, I just knew it was for me. Of course, at the time, I had no idea how many ways it would become a part of my life going forward. She jogged my curiosity about my generation, the so-called baby boomers, describing them as post-war babies who, quote, had as a generation a unique sense of empowerment and entitlement, and who had a stance that reflected their collective belief that they could make a difference. I translated that as purpose, which I felt deeply stirring in me during that time. About the same time, I read Seth Godin's book, Small is the New Big, and I found some of what he wrote was applicable to my life too, zooming. He defined that term as stretching your limits without threatening your foundation. I loved that word the minute I read it. He encouraged his readers to handle new ideas, new opportunities, and new challenges without triggering that change avoidance reflex. I translated that as inspiration, which I also felt deeply stirring in me. Of course, the fear was always there, just below the surface, but I chose to focus on the inspiration. I knew I wanted to boom with my generation, make a difference in the world. It seemed out of the question for me, but the idea wouldn't go away. I felt a longing I could not explain. And I knew I wanted to zoom too, stretch myself, conquer my fear, and land on solid ground. And I knew I was a late bloomer, defying the culture of retirement, mostly because I had not gone through the normal stages of life with my peers. So many things for me began later than most. So I guess I'm saying I'm a late blooming but zooming boomer, or something like that. The third chapter of my life has been and is continuing to be full and rewarding, but not without fears to overcome and trials to go through and heartaches to bear, and not without lies to be recognized, reflected upon, replaced, and then habits to be broken. I have more memories to share, along with new things that have come to the surface, and challenges that presented themselves that I never could have imagined. I shared the first 50 years of my life as I saw them from my current perspective looking back. And I will do some of that in this chapter also. But moving forward, I will be much more in a series of extended now times. As you recall, now times can be momentary or can span years of unfolding. It's an attitude of awareness, of watching, of adjusting. These past 20 years from age 50 to 70 have been the end of my third marriage. The discovery of a secret life will do that. The surfacing of an artistic bent I didn't know existed. Another milestone in my education. A business venture that I was not prepared for. A couple of books I never dreamed of writing. And a series of speaking and teaching opportunities I didn't really want to do, My introversion is strong. So here goes. About memories. I was walking on the beach in Padre Island in early 2000, just minding my own business, loving the sound of the waves and hearing the seagulls. Really, the beach is my happy place. I've often wondered if it is because I was born in Long Beach, California, and I have a picture of me as a toddler walking with my mom on the beach. As I walked along the beach in Padre Island as an adult, and this is hard to explain, I felt the urge to paint, watercolor in particular. I knew nothing about art, nothing. The next day I went to an office supply store and found a box of student-level paint and a tablet of paper along with a brush. I messed around with them for a few days before I knew I needed some help. The library in Corpus Christi provided what I needed, and I was off to the races, using the little bit I was gaining to produce something quite intriguing within a minute or two. That's how long it took to actually do what I had learned. Surprisingly, some simple but lovely paintings to my eyes emerged, and I was fascinated enough to continue. Since then, I've sold some pieces, had some hung in both a local gallery and in a local Starbucks. Some of my early pieces are on Fine Art America. No one has been more amazed than me. I love experimenting as I continue to learn, but I must confess that I have to break through the fear barriers to do it, telling myself it's only practice. But that's what works for me. Maybe in the years to come, I will be able to approach that beautifully textured watercolor paper, brush in hand, and palette nearby with confidence and joy. That is my hope. Memories are such strange things. Somehow there was a link between walking on the beach, gaining an interest in art, thinking about my mother, who you might recall in my chapter 1 abandoned the family when I was in early elementary school after years of family dysfunction due mostly to alcoholism. Previous to enrolling in a PhD program in 2007, I hadn't taken the time to do much systematic reflecting on my life. I kept a journal, but the topics touched upon were rather hit and miss and sporadic. Then I came face to face with the imposter phenomenon in the early days of my program, and it all changed drastically. When I received word that the topic of my doctoral dissertation had been approved, I first gathered everything I could find on it from 1978 to the present. At that time, that was 2008. My learning style forced me to get the whole picture before I could move on to any of the parts. I'm a whole to parts, concrete, sequential visual learner to the max, much like I am an extreme introvert. Once I realized that I was a classic case, reading the research was like looking in the mirror and finding my life there. The memories just flooded me. And the more I researched, the longer my list of memories became. I had to translate my childhood memories using my adult mindset in order to find the words I needed. I discovered the mental images that came into focus had emotional stirrings attached to them. Those of us who have had a blighted childhood and decide to write our stories often experience this painful inward turn as we encounter the memories that have taken up residence within us. Some we might try to quickly tuck away in secret places of intentional forgetting, and that might work for a while. And we might attempt to cast out others into the wind with the hope that they will be carried off and forgotten completely and forever. The ones that wouldn't go away are the very ones I had to focus my attention on initially. The others would resurface later. But it is so strange, the things we remember. I didn't choose my memories. They chose me and brought those old feelings with them. The cluster of my early childhood memories had shame and humiliation attached. The ones from my early adulthood also brought some feelings back into focus. I felt them keenly and cried buckets of tears in the remembering. I know what the word of Yah says about who we are and what he's done for us, But I also know that knowing these things intellectually is actually just holding them at bay, giving mental assent to them, but unable to apprehend or internalize them. Because of the lies, they occupy the space. Selah, stop for a moment and consider that. The lies occupy the space. There's a process that must be undertaken for truth to become reality and actively show up in our lives. Replacing the lies with truth is necessary because trying to add truth on top of lies creates confusion. Our Adonai requires truth in the inward parts, Psalm 51:6. That's where the seeds of the lies have been sown and have taken root. I have found that once the lies are exposed, I then have to deal with the experiences and the people involved. Unforgiveness is not an option for the believer. So here we go with lies. Number 18, I'll be exposed as a fraud. As the imposter research piled up on my desk in the student housing unit I occupied on campus, and as the list of memories that mirrored it grew longer, I began to write what I have since called morning pages. I had no intention of sharing these personal heart cries with anyone, much less publishing them in the book that would result from the dissertation. But there they are in my first book titled The Imposter Effect, a closer look at a classic case, published 2017. Here's a sample of what a classic imposter thinks during the research phase and then writes when faced with challenges that seem beyond her capabilities. I titled this Ocean Cluster. It's a morning page. I can't sleep when I'm working on a project. My mind just won't shut down. Sometimes I feel like the ocean is inside of me. Deep places, big places, even secret places, where memories, ideas, dreams, quotes, random thoughts, snatches of past research, first lines of books, and so much more all drift around, silently moving from here to there by forces completely unseeable. I'm trying to make sense of my ocean clutter, and I have aspirations of encircling bits of it with the big net, much like fishermen catch bait. I want to connect and reshape my clutter into something bigger and better than it would otherwise be if left to itself, in order for it to become meaningful and useful for someone else. That's the end of the morning page. Fraudulence is such a good word for what I feel most of the time. I look back on my life and wonder if I was ever a good friend to anyone. I wonder if I was ever close to being a good mother to my children, a good wife to my husbands. Yes, I have to be honest here. Or a good teacher to my students. Now I have to deal with my fraudulent feelings about my writing too. Am I capable of writing my story in such a way that it will be interesting? Do I have anything worthwhile to add to the educational conversation for the general public? What is going on in my unconscious and subconscious creative side is a big question. Of course I wonder if anything is, but that's so negative, so imposterish. I am opposing those wanderings at every step and with every breath. I'm sick to death of thinking that I have done something wrong and that there is something wrong with me, that I'm a fraud in whatever capacity I find myself. I feel inadequate even with the PhD. Will I never recover from viewing myself as a high school dropout that I am? I had a dream not long ago that I was sitting around a table in a smoke-smelling room with people I didn't know. Coffee cups were everywhere. I sat listening intently as others shared a bit about themselves until it came to me. My mind went blank, my body went numb like it always does in public, but I managed to spit it out. Hi, my name is Andrea, and I'm a high school dropout. That's the end of my morning page. Please note that when I wrote the above, I had known and deeply loved the Messiah for more than 4 decades. So it's not like I hadn't received forgiveness and healing and deliverance from a lot of the things up until then. But our Father is never done with us. I had carried lies around in me that I had no idea were hidden there, and they had ruled my life suddenly, deviously, painfully. When they began to be exposed, I was eager and horrified at the same time. So much time had passed, so many messed up experiences had occurred, and so many people had been collateral damage. Fearing exposure as a fraud explains a great deal. Why I worked extra hard, starting early and consistently over preparing. Why I turned away when complimented on an accomplishment. Why I tend to set goals below my actual capabilities. Why I can't acknowledge my personal or professional success, even in the face of tangible proof. Why I am full of secret fears hidden behind my smile. Why I fear new things, projects, jobs, relationships, or experiences. Why I fear failure as well as success. Why I often go above and beyond and do more than is expected. Excuse me, like I'm trying to prove something. Why I think I should be able to do anything asked of me. It's the Superman complex. Another lie quickly became apparent to me, and this is the lie now in full bloom, which led me to seek help. I didn't know it was there until I read the research on the imposter phenomenon and identified so strongly with what I read. Initially, I felt bipolar, not knowing if I wanted to shout for joy or sit down and have a good cry. It took me some time to find my way along the grieving spectrum, feeling alone, then angry, then depressed at times, and finally landing on some form of acceptance of the impact that the imposter phenomenon had had on my life. This lie has robbed me of so much time. It has stolen the joy that comes with discovery and has even damaged relationships at times. But as a believer and a researcher, I have to continually ask myself the question, do I want to know the truth, or do I just want to be right in what I think I already know? I could have read that initial article about the imposter. I could have glimpsed myself in it. I could have thanked my professor and moved on, living the life I had always lived. Looking back, I think the grieving process was for that life. I was who I thought I was. It was who I thought I was. I didn't yet know who I was created to be. In some sense, I began experiencing the shaking talked about in Hebrews 12:27, when everything that can be shaken is being shaken, so that only the unshakable will remain. There are some of the issues I have had to face as I come to understand the imposter issues. I have been lied to. I have lied to others. I have been betrayed, and I have betrayed others. I have been deceived, and I have deceived others. What has been done to me and what I have done calls for spirit-led repentance, leading to heartfelt forgiveness for myself as well as for others. The purpose of the shaking provides opportunity for change. For me, it is uprooting the lies so that I can replace them with the truth and find the abundant life provided for me by the Savior. He is the Savior who saves. He saves us from ourselves, and the shaking continues. But when that reaction pops up in response to a lie I had believed, whether it's the fear of failure or the fear of success or the press to do something bigger, better, faster, I am now much better prepared to say no. And then I take a minute to see where I am in the process of replacing the lie that caused my response in the first place. I've come to understand that while the process is sometimes instantaneous, more often it plays out over time. I have to be careful not to just press through my fears and carry on, because that automatic response will most certainly pop up again and again if I don't stop it. I see the automatic responses as grooves in my brain, much like mountains and valleys. And I see my work of replacing lies with truth in this word in Isaiah 40, verse 4. Every valley shall be lifted and filled up, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked and uneven shall be made straight and level, and the rough places a plain. This action of saying no to the imposter lies leaves me free to say yes. Yah wants truth in the inward parts. Psalm 51:6. His truth must get from our heads to our heart before it becomes our life. Over the past year or so, I have been thinking about and speaking aloud and sharing abroad the portion of truth that is at work to replace the lies I have believed. Perhaps repeating the truth that replaces your lies will work in your life too. Psalm 103, 1-5 reads as follows. Bless, affectionately, gratefully praise Yah, O my soul, and all that is deepest within me. Bless his holy name. Press, affectionately, gratefully praise Yah, O my soul, and forget not one of all his benefits, who forgives every one of all our iniquities, who heals each one of our diseases, who redeems our life from the pit and destruction, who beautifies, dignifies, and crowns us with loving kindness and tender mercy, who satisfies our mouth, our necessity and desire at our personal age and situation with good, so that our youth is renewed like the eagles, strong, overcoming, and soaring. I've determined to believe this word, that this is my position in my relationship with Yah, and I take it as my own position as I move away from the imposter life. I recently heard that still small voice speaking to me, get your own life. My initial reaction was, what? Don't I have my own life? Have I ever had my own life? Looking back as a young mother still in my teens, I did not think much about having my own life. Who has time to think when you have several toddlers to care for, a household to maintain, and perhaps a job to hold down? You do what you have to do, and then you do it again. And if you are affected by the imposter phenomenon, as I was, you mistakenly believe that you should be able to do all of that with ease and more. Perfectionism drives you to set goals that are humanly unattainable, and when you don't meet them, you feel like a fraud. As a young adult, I automatically valued everyone else's opinions, plans, ideas, timetables, and preferences to mine, waiting, always waiting to see what someone else wanted to do, what they wanted to eat, where they wanted to go. And if you're a believer, the list of shoulds mounts up, increasing the expectations that others seem to automatically attach to your new life. I should be stronger. I should be able to move on. I should trust Yah enough that this should not knock me over. I should be able to sleep, to exercise, to write. I should be confident enough to tackle new publishing projects. I should be brave enough to speak in public without fear. But once you face the reality that you've been lied to about yourself, and you recognize that you have affected your life, and you have taken some time to reflect upon the root of them, then you can begin to replace them, those lies, with the truth. Remember, this can occur quickly or can span months or even years. It's been a decade for me, so take heart. And it continues. A few months ago, I was reading an article on Medium, it's an online forum for writers, and experienced a gradual fall into a kind of despair. Lies can be exposed from the strangest sources and at the oddest times. The article I was reading was an essay by Joan Didion titled The Notebook, which seemed familiar enough to me that I went searching and found her book on my bookshelf, titled Slouching Toward Bethlehem. The article is about writers and their desire to document life as it happens by taking notes in the moment, always having paper and pen at hand. I strongly identified with this and let my mind wander off into what kind of journal I wanted next year. At the time, I had 3 notebooks, well, really 4, that I had written in for the past current year, and I was not a happy woman about not completely filling one before I started a new one. I had to take a step back mentally and emotionally to see what had just happened to me. I was working on the draft of The Truth About Lies, so lies I have believed about myself was a topic that was on my mind almost continuously and still is. Then it hit me. Oh, this is another lie of the enemy trying to cause me to stumble, stress, feel overwhelmed, paralyzed. And it worked for a few moments until I realized what it was. Then lie number 19, I'm running out of time. That lie left me with a twinge of panic, but not for long this time. In the past, I would have believed this lie and suffered the impact of it for who knows how long, but not anymore. I'm nearing the end of my third chapter, age 50 to 75, and now I'm over it. I'm into chapter 4. But I also know that my genes are good in the aging department. Both maternal grandmothers lived to nearly 100, well into their fourth chapter, which is age 75 to 100. So really, Andrea, I told myself, just relax and take care of yourself and make the most of the time you have, redeeming the time. And remember what Abba says about time. Your times are in my hands. Psalm 31:15. All the days ordained for you were written in my book before one of them came to pass. Psalm 139:16. I have supplied all your need for time and energy. Philippians 4:19. I am restoring your youth so that you can become strong, overcoming, and soaring. Psalm 103, verse 5. You will bring forth fruit even in old age. Psalm 92:14. I've told myself for some time now, just forget about your age and just live your life. I need to remind myself of this more often. In my book, I say take a moment and capture your thoughts here. But we will go on to review. And I say, and rewrite your own story, the chapters of our lives. You have a lot to ponder if you are anything like me. It takes time for the pieces to come together enough to make sense of it all. It took me a decade. It is my hope that I can reduce the time and effort for you, however, by reminding you of some of the key points and giving you space to begin rewriting your own story. By that I mean experiencing life in a new way going forward, by rooting out the lies about yourself that are buried deep, by listing them as they surface, by reflecting on the circumstances and the effect each had on you, by beginning the process of forgiveness for all concerned, by hearing from Yah, his thoughts toward you, and taking note of them. I hope you still have your favorite pen and pencil ready and additional paper handy. My lies may not be the same as yours, and what I replace them with might not be what you hear for yourself. We don't interact with each member of our family or each close friend in the exact same way. Neither does Abba interact with us in the same way. He's not limited in his boundless love and care for us as individuals. It makes no difference what chapter you are in at the present time. Of course, if you're under 25 and have reached this page, then you are blessed indeed. The sooner you can leave the fears behind and move forward with the truth, the sooner you can begin to experience life in a new way. But if you are in your second chapter, age 25 to 50, you are more likely to have to intentionally carve out some time in order to proceed with this section of the book. The benefit of this time in your life is that you gained experience and have felt the impact of the imposter phenomenon more acutely than your younger cohort. But then you also added wisdom to those years, which will help. Those of us in our third chapter, however, must fight regret over wasted years, broken hearts, countless missteps, in addition to finding our new way forward. It's not an impossible task, as I have proven by tackling it myself and making great progress in it along the way. It's just not an easy task or a tearless one. The 4 little words, before, then, now, and next. It's very hard to continue to live unintentionally after reading what you have read in this book, especially if you are experiencing the imposter phenomenon intensely. You now have a name for it. You now know you're not alone. You now have decisions to make about your next, for your now determines your next. You are in a now time right now. I have been in a now time for over 10 years, from reading that first article in 2008 to the present. Yours doesn't have to last that long, however. Remember, a now time is an attitude, a position you're taking about what you are discovering, about how you will incorporate this new awareness into your being, about what you will do differently as a result. My hope is that I have been able to minimize the cognitive dissonance that may have settled upon you as you looked into the mirror of the imposter phenomenon and saw yourself. You might recall that as I read that first article on it, I didn't know if I should break down and weep or do a dance as I walked along reading it. This is a good place to take some additional notes. Describe your emotional reactions upon looking into the imposter mirror. Note where you were physically in and in what chapter of your life you were in. We can skip over probably this page and go on, because this would be for if you're reading the book and you're taking notes and you're serious about examining your life. So learning about the imposter was a tipping point for me. It took some time for me to see an expanded picture and realize the spiritual implications for freedom. When I wrote the first book on the imposter, I was focused on seeing myself in it and wondering how people like me flourish in spite of all the fears and insecurities we have. In 2017, I hadn't yet seen the lies that were at the root of my memories, much less understood that action would be needed on my part in order to live the abundant life Messiah promised us. That's why my now time has lasted so long. Shadow people. I wrote the first book from a deep place of longing to be free from the effects of living an imposter life. I am making great progress, but I wrote this book from a deep place of longing for you to be free too. In this freedom, Mashiach has made us free and completely liberated us. Stand fast then, and do not be hampered or held ensnared, and submit again to the yoke of slavery which you have once put off. Galatians 5:1. Freedom beckons us to come out of the shadows and step away from the edges where we have lived as shadow people. I came across that term while reading Julie Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, and immediately identified with it. I saw myself not so much as a shadow artist, like she describes, but as a shadow person, one who moves all around the edges of what is really in my heart to do. I have had many jobs and several professional positions in my life, but I didn't come out of the shadows as a writer, which had been a dream of mine since elementary school, until I came face to face with the imposter phenomenon. As an English teacher, I understand that writing is a combination of skill, craft, desire, creativity, determination, and perseverance. But I had to fight through what my imposter voice whispered to me relentlessly as I wrote that first book. This is what I heard. I lack the necessary skills to be successful. I have not honed the craft sufficiently. My desire to write is self-satisfying. My creativity is sporadic. My perseverance is underdeveloped. I am unsure of my ability to perform. You might want to grab your pencil again to document the thoughts on your own position in the shadow areas of your life. And we can go on through to the next part too. As I stated previously, I'm not a psychologist or an anthropologist or a literary critic, and I'm not a theologian. I'm just the kind of woman who, or I'm the kind of man who. It works for everyone. Do you remember my list following that beginning statement? I don't want you to mimic my list. I just want to challenge you to make your own over time as things surface, as you become aware of your inclinations, your automatic responses, your preferences, your idiosyncrasies, whatever else you want to add. It's very revealing. This kind of list is not an original idea of mine, but when I ran across it on Facebook, posted by one of my writer friends, I messaged her for permission to use it for myself and then for my book. She agreed. So I saved a Word document on my desktop, and whenever something comes to mind, I just add it to my ongoing list. I'm learning some interesting things about myself from that list, and I believe you will learn some things about yourself as well. It's a step in coming out of the shadows. So begin your list here if you want, initially, until you can get one going on your computer or in your personal journal. Begin your list with, I'm the kind of man, or I'm the kind of woman who. The process. Step 1 is recognition. After reading the research on the imposter phenomenon, summaries of which are in my first book, I proclaimed myself a classic case because of the score I received on the KIP, 97 out of 100, and on the recognition that my life so closely mirrored it. I spent close to 2 years gathering, reviewing, and taking notes, including creating character profiles for the imposter child, the imposter teen, and the imposter adult, in order to write the doctoral dissertation and then The Imposter Effect, a closer look by a classic case. When I really saw the profiles, I realized I could have drafted them from my own life. That's how closely I related to what I found. Memories of childhood and early adulthood incidents surface from deep places, like air bubbles from a diver's mask. When I glimpsed one, I hurriedly wrote it down so I wouldn't let it float away. Once the research was completed, I went back to that list of incidents, sometimes comprising of 1 or 2 words, and began the painful process of remembering. As I thought over the incidents, I realized at the time I had very little understanding of the impact each would have on my later life. They are memories for a reason. I felt something. I just didn't know enough then to protect myself from the impact. While reading this book, or my other one, have you had bubbles surface from your life? It's another area where you could write if you have the book, or just take some notes. Step 2 in the process is reflection. Reflection means to see again, the root meaning of reflection, and it's so appropriate to the task at hand. We have to be willing to go back to the time and place and look again at the circumstances and the people involved that surround the memory. I spent hours just sitting in my chair, staring out the window at the mountains not far from where I live, and thinking and rethinking and seeing things on some level for the first time. I thought once I got my first book out there, I would be free to move on with another topic I was interested in writing about, but Yah had different plans for me. As hard as I tried, I couldn't get away from the imposter. I came across a quote that set me straight. Quote, "You have to write the book that wants to be written." The book that wanted to be written was not the book I necessarily wanted to write at the time. I'm just being honest here. I had a novel in mind titled The Writer's Room that I hope to get back to at some point. I set it aside and began the process of discovering what book wanted to be written. What you are holding in your hand or hearing with your ears is the third major rewrite of it. The working title of that first draft was Identity Theft of Another Kind. The working title of the second draft was The Fourth Voice. I have become fully persuaded that writing is not for the faint of heart. I have a pile of those early drafts to shred now. But reflection is what brought the lies to the surface. Before then, I just had the memories, written as vignettes, and the recognition that I had lived with imposter feelings my whole life. I recognized I could go on the way I always had, but I didn't have to. It wasn't until I had a conversation with an author I was working with who offered to counsel me through the grieving process after this discovery of my husband's secret life that it hit me. He said, "You know, Andrea, true biblical counseling is just helping to replace the lies you have believed with the truth." He had uncovered my new way forward, my life after the imposter. Just as I had to remember, I had to reflect. I had to see, rethink until I discovered the lies. I had to wait for them to surface, and I was willing to do that because the lies had the emotions attached to them, because the lies had distorted my identity, because the lies had ruled me unknowingly, relentlessly, even ruthlessly, and it was all hidden from me. I have a question for you to ask yourself. Are you willing to spend the time and energy to reflect, and then to wait and reflect again until the lies begin to surface? Step number 3 in the process, rewrite. When I say rewrite your story, I'm not suggesting that you literally become a writer. I'm saying you have the opportunity to begin to rewrite your inner life, removing the obstacles and the hindrances that have caused you pain as the Ruach leads you and helps you. If you're going through the process as you read, engaging with me, I'm the kind of man, kind of woman who prompt is a good place to start. And you might have a word or two to remind you of some memories that have surfaced. You might even have some lies uncovered. However, it's what we are leading up to that is the key. I don't know if you can get this. I don't know if you can get to this step without going through the previous one. I must not have been able to. Coming to replacement was like coming up for air after taking a deep dive. For me, the truth is that critical, even vital. The Messiah said, "He is the way, the truth, and the life." His words have become real to me as I have gone through this process. Over the years, I have come to love the Word and have spent countless hours reading and meditating on sections that I'm drawn into, in addition to systematically reading through it completely many times. I say this to share how replacement came to me. I found myself hearing some verses I had memorized years ago while pondering my lies. Other times I was reading the Word and a section would just jump off the page in relationship to another lie on my list. I would come across scripture someone posted on social media that spoke to me. In each of these cases, I quickly jotted down the reference and a word or two about the lies so that I could get back to them. If you have a list of lies going, have you come across the truths that will replace them in your heart? If so, begin the journey that is so life-changing, replacing the lies with the truth. Replacement is critical because if you just see the lie and leave it buried in you, you make no progress. And if you recall, the writer of the Psalms cries out to Abba about this very thing. "Behold, you desire truth in the inner being. Make me therefore to know wisdom in my inmost heart." Psalm 51:6. It's never too late, as Elizabeth Elliot has written somewhere, to be what you always have been, but just didn't know it. The implication is that slight change in the rest of her quote was staggering to me. I have come to see it a bit differently over the past few years, but not to be what you might have been, as she wrote, but what we always have been without knowing it. Consider these 9 little words. As he is, so are we in this world. 1 John 4:17. I understand that we can only live up to the light that we have, but glimpsing the possible makes glaring the actual. At least it did for me. We need to know more in the deepest meaning of knowing, apprehending, taking the truth into our very being and then walking in it. Francis du Toit, in his Mirror Bible translation, goes so far as to say that Mashiach is not an example for us, with the implication that we are not to try to be like him, but an example of us. In Romans 8:29 we read, "For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestine to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren." Oh, please don't think I'm there. I'm just being drawn there in fear and trembling. And we may be stumbling upon the reason so many have identity issues. We have unwittingly allowed the God of this world to blind our minds to so many things, the so-called blind spots that we have about ourselves and about the world we inhabit. I've begun to wonder if it was the culture that moved us away from following Abba's ways, or if we moved the culture, like the question whether it was the chicken or the egg that came first. Either way, some great exchanges have occurred that have affected who we think we are. They are not great in the sense of wonderful, quite the opposite. They are great in the sense of ramifications on identity, because we may be living on the outskirts of the new creation that we are. See 2 Corinthians 5:17. There's a question about the Messiah's final words before he died and rose again that begs to be answered. He said, "It is finished." The question that begs to be answered in my mind is what all is in that it. I'm still wondering, but I'll leave you with this to consider. Do you want to know the truth, or do you just want to be right about what you think you already know because the pain of realizing you've been lied to, deceived, duped, misled, whatever you want to call it, is too high a price to pay for it? It's a fair question and an important one. I hope your answer is yes to wanting the truth, because when it is, something of significance happens in the spiritual realm. We are like a bird escaped from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. Psalm 124, verse 7. Take a moment and capture your thoughts.